everybody, welcome to another episode of From What I Gather, where today I'm making this wild mushroom galette with some chanterelles that we just picked this afternoon. It's a rustic dish that's also super classy and everyone is gonna love it. So let's get started. So I don't really wash my chanterelles. Just to prep them for cleaning, I'll knock off the big pieces of dirt that I can see and any of the pine needles that are on there. But even if a stray pine needle makes it into my galette, it's just going to be a little more rustic. So I'm going to cut these fairly small, because I don't want a lot of big chunks in my galette. But keep in mind, there's a ton of water that's going to cook out of these, so they're going to shrink down quite a bit. So I'm not going to dice them or anything. I'm just going to make kind of small slices. Like so many of life's greatest things, this recipe begins with crisping up some bacon. And I'm going to go ahead and use a half a pound of bacon here that I've cut into about 1-inch squares. And I'm just going to cook that kind of slow, get the fat to render out, and get it nice and crispy. Now I'm going to take out my crispy bacon. Just let that drain on these paper plates, set it aside. I'm going to drain off essentially all of that bacon fat. So I'm not going to need it for this recipe. And then I'm going to crank this up to quite high heat. When that gets pretty ripping hot, then I'm going to throw in my mushrooms into what is essentially a dry pan. Very little oil left in there. No oil at all is fine with this. I always like to start my mushrooms with a dry saute to flash off a lot of the water. Then I'll introduce some oils and other flavors so they can then soak that up. Now I throw in my sliced up mushrooms in a very hot pan. And I'm using about 3 pounds here, maybe 2.5. It doesn't really matter. It's more than I'm going to need for the galette, but the leftover filling for this thing will keep really well for several days in the refrigerator, and I can use it for all kinds of things. Talk about an omelet, mister. Now, it's only been a few minutes, and you can see how much water is coming out of those mushrooms already. And I'm not going to pour that out. I'm going to leave that in and reduce it down because it does carry a lot of flavor of the mushroom with it. And so I'm just going to concentrate that flavor in these mushrooms. So now you can start to hear a little sizzle and see that most of that water is dried up. So now it's time to start introducing flavors into here because our mushrooms are like little sponges and they're all just prepped and ready to soak up all kinds of flavor. Before these start to really stick to the pan, just throw in a couple of tablespoons of butter and a nice big pinch of salt. About a half a teaspoon there. And now we do have to kind of pay attention to our heat. You can't overcook these mushrooms, but you can burn them. So I'll bring the heat down to about medium now. And now that butter is melted, and I've got a nice big onion thinly sliced, and I'll go ahead and throw that all in there and season that with about another half a teaspoon of salt. I'll hit that with some fresh ground pepper. And now I'm going to saute this on medium-low heat for a good long time until those onions really wilt and actually begin to caramelize. I'm not going to go all the way to caramelized, but I'm going to get them to be a nice golden brown color. So I've been sauteing this for right about 20 minutes. The onions are nice and soft and sweet now, and so I'm going to go ahead and finish off the filling. And to do that, I'm going to begin by adding 4 cloves of minced garlic. And I'm going to get the heat up again, fairly high, medium-high heat. Keep an eye on that garlic. I don't want to burn it. So I'm just going to cook it for a minute or so while this gets nice and hot before I cool everything down in there with some wine. Now I got my heat going about medium-high, and I'm going to add a fortified wine. You could use some Madeira or some sherry. In this case, I'm using Marsala because I had an open bottle, and I'm going to throw in half a cup of that at least. So as that wine cooks down, it's going to get nice and sweet, and it's really going to pair well with the onion and the mushroom and give everything kind of a nice caramely taste. It smells incredible. I'm just going to evaporate pretty much all that wine off, and then I'm going to set this thing outside until it cools down to room temperature or below. My filling is nice and cooled down now. The reason I want it cooled down is so that it doesn't melt all the butter out of my pastry while I'm filling it before I get it into the oven, because that'll make for a sort of a leathery pastry rather than a nice flaky pastry that we want. So I'll start with that. I will add in the bacon. The reason I didn't add it in before is so that it wouldn't soak up a bunch of the liquid out of the mushrooms and become leathery. And I'm also going to add some kind of fresh herb. Now I'm going to use thyme today because it's kind of mild, and rosemary would be very good, but it's a strong flavor. Just like I usually say, I like to add just a pop of freshness and greenness toward the end of these dishes. And now I'm going to grate a bunch of Parmesan into this, and I'm using the good stuff today because I'm feeling fancy, but you can use the stuff in the green bottle, where you can use any cheese you like in here. You know, whatever you like. Break it up into some chunks, grate it in there. I like the Parmesan here because it's nice and dry, and it's not going to add moisture to my filling, but it is going to add a lot of good flavor and some of that umami. We'll just stir that in. Give it a taste to check for seasoning. Oh my, that's going to be excellent. So I'll set this aside and get my pastry ready. I actually made this dough about an hour ago, and I've had it in the refrigerator so it could get nice and hydrated before rolling out. And you can use some store-bought puff pastry or pie pastry for this, and it's going to be great. And I'll put a link up in the corner at the end of the video for my venison hand pie recipes, where I'll show you the recipe for this dough. Now we'll just transfer this to a nice parchment-lined baking sheet for filling. I'm just gonna take my filling. It's not gonna take all of this filling, I guarantee you that. We'll see. We'll pop it in the middle. Start to spread it out from there. And I'm gonna leave about 1.5 inches or 2 inches of dough around the edge of this to fold over. And it's not going to be, it doesn't have to be real pretty or anything. This is a rustic dish. It's kind of a free-form tart, if you will. So I'll just roll a little bit over, then overlap it with the next little bit. See right here, overlap a little, tuck that in, and then overlap this a little. I'll push that in with my finger, and overlap just a bit. And you don't have to, you can just fold it right over the top. You don't have to make these little pleats or anything like I do, but I mean, they are kind of pretty. Now my egg wash, I'll just beat up the egg. I don't add any milk or water to this, and I use the whole egg. And I think that just gives me the most beautiful golden and shiny crust. And I'll just take my little pastry brush and sort of glaze over the edges, just like so. And right before this goes in here, I'm just going to hit the top of it with a little more of that Parmesan, staying mainly within the boundaries of the crust. A little on that crust is actually going to look pretty cool, but mostly just on the filling. And now this is going to go into my preheated 400-degree oven for 40 to 45 minutes until that dough gets nice and golden and crispy. That was 40 minutes in a 400-degree oven. And I want to say that looks just about perfect. So I'm going to transfer this to a cooling rack and let it cool for at least 30 minutes. I want it pretty cool. My favorite is actually room temperature, but I think most people prefer it just slightly warm. So that's going to take a good 30 minutes. But while this is still piping hot, I'm going to go on half of it, and I'm going to sprinkle some crumbled blue cheese. Only on half because I know that's not for everybody, but for me, that is going to be awesome. Now let's see how we did. Oh, that crunch sounds just about right. And I am going to take a piece of the blue cheese, of course. All right, let's give that a shot. Hoo-wee! You see the size of that chicken? Well, friends, sometimes you blow your own doors off, and that is why we play the game. This is so good. The flavor is so strong and bold, but so well balanced, and the textures are phenomenal. It's really, it's just delicious. So, I hope you get a chance to get out there and get some of your own wild mushrooms. And even if you can't, I hope you try this, and I hope you love it. And if you do, please like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.